Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome. It's Wednesday night, and we're going to be talking about Adnan Syed's reply brief. We're going to be talking about where things stand and what we're doing going forward. Hello. Come on in. Come on in. Come on, everybody. Come on in. How are we doing? Have we had a few good last days or what? Huh? I mean, wasn't that brief dynamite? And at the end, maybe I can answer some questions. One thing we're going to do for format, and you guys can post things and whatever, but for questions, I'm going to have a question answer period at the end, just because I have enough trouble keeping on track. So if you could hold like the questions to the end, that would be great, so I can keep it really straightforward and hit the points I want. And feel free, if you're on the app, to swipe to the left. Swipe to the left. You can share on Twitter, Facebook, email with people so that people know this is going on and they can join in. And I think it's swipe to the left to do that. Of course, you can touch the screen if you want to say you like something or whatever. I'm not begging for it, and the hearts don't mean anything other than I'm happy or I approve. So what are we talking about today? Well, first of all, one thing is, I know as many of you are coming in, we haven't really gotten started yet, but Bob Ruff says this is a movement. We're a movement of people. So tell us, where are people watching from? I'm in the Twin Cities. Where are you folks? Let's see if we can see if we're really a movement. Do we have people everywhere on here? So if you're there and you want to just quickly post where you're coming in from, we've got Phoenix, NorCal. So I take it that Northern California. I'm originally from the North State, which is way up in Maryland, Los Angeles, Dallas, Alabama, Dallas. NorCal, that's a movement. California, it's a movement. New York City. So we've got a movement here. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about where we stand now, some of the best moments of Adnan Syed's reply brief, which had some good ones, and kind of where we're going forward with solving this. So I tend to be a bit whimsical, and I think I can be more whimsical than usual today, kind of where things stand. And a lot of people have commented, who would have thought that a year ago I would be following a case about a wrongfully convicted prisoner? And not just following it, but it being a huge part of my life. I mean, did any of you think that would be where you'd be today? I know Rabia did, but that was her life, and we just kind of came along for the ride. But that's where we are. And so where do we stand? Well, Shakespeare said, there's a tide in the affairs of men. Well, we know today there's more to be done, but the tide has turned big time, like an avalanche, and it really has turned. But let's think back for a moment to when we all got on this bandwagon. And at least for me, it was when Serial first came out, and then when Undisclosed came out, I really moved more in the advocacy camp. For Serial, I was getting to hear the story and thinking, what's going on? And then with Undisclosed, I think like many of you, I started being shocked and appalled by how this went down. So as I sit here, I'm thinking of a quote. I say John Henry Newman a lot. Did we but see when life first opened, how our journey lay between its opening and its closing day. And that's what I just feel in the last year. There's something magical that's happened. There's a tide in the affairs of men that's turned, and I don't think I'm going too far to say a lot. This has changed me, and I think this has changed many of you. There's something that's happened, and it's not as though we can get back the past. So Adnan is never going to get back his youth. His family is never going to get back their son as he was. But there's something new that can come out of it. And I'm going to read something that seems to strike it for me. It's this. The past never returns. This is again John Henry Newman. The past never returns. It is never good. If we are to escape existing ills, it must be by going forward. The past is out of date. The past is dead. As well may the dead live to us. Well may the dead profit us as the past returned. It's so something is happening, but it's not just taking what happened in the past. It's making something new. And there's a second spring. That's the title of this essay I quoted from. That something new's happened that is magical because it goes against what we see in the affairs of our lives. That when the state put Anon away, it was a death sentence in a way. That he was being consigned to the outer darkness. We were disposing of him. He's not part of society. And the response to that, the movement to change that, is not just a direct pushback. It's something so much bigger. So let's think for a moment to my second point. So the first point within where we stand now is we can't know what the future holds. Adnan couldn't have known what was going to happen to him when he was 17. And I dare say he couldn't know that this movement would happen. But it required people, a small group of people who were on the firing lines from day one, and Rabia being one. And so before I move to my second point, which is the scale of the truth movement versus the lie movement, the lie being what locked him up versus the truth movement, I'll say that with where was I going with this? With Rabia, in the recent Undisclosed Addendum, the one that just came out, I was so happy that she had that moment where she talked about the cell phone records and how she felt. And that opened up for me a feeling I don't know that I've had to get some sense of what her life has been like all these years in Anon's family. Because for her, now I see, I'm guessing, I don't know Robbie except on Twitter, but now I see that for her, the experience of the Serial podcast, must have been so much like Anon's. Do you remember that scene when Anon, see, doesn't that sound like it's not real? But it is. That part when Anon tells Sarah how in the letter, he weighs every word. He has to be so careful. He must, hold back everything because he can't lose his integrity. Because if he loses that, he loses everything. And I think Rabia must have had that same experience with, I'll speak for myself, sympathetic when Undisclosed started, or when I heard the Serial podcast. I was sympathetic to her, but I thought, well, victims' family, they always, not victims, accused family, they always believe them. We'll see. And I just have to say, that feeling must be so difficult when you're the person that knows the truth, and can't even get people to listen. And when Rabia shared about how disappointing, how gut-wrenching it was when the Serial podcast seemed to say that there was something to these cell records, I felt that. And could she have known at that moment that she would be vindicated, not just a little vindicated, but as big of a vindication as you're ever going to get this side of paradise? It must be sweet, bittersweet, but sweet. And we can all share that even people who are well-intentioned, like the people who did Serial, can still get it wrong in profound ways that are incredibly painful. And that just comes out to me from this case. It seems like something from life, and I just felt that. I felt for a second Rabia, and now I'm thinking back. I know other people have said when I first saw Rabia when she was during Serial, when she was posting and she was doing some Google Hangouts, she seemed so stressed and tired. And now I see Rabia, and she's such a different person. And I'm so grateful that she was able to walk through the valley of death and come out this side. And I know that her faith and other people's thoughts and prayers made a big difference there. Scale. So let's think about scale for a minute. it's both disheartening and exciting. It's disheartening. So what does it take to lock someone away forever? It takes some people with an obsession to win at all costs. It takes some trumped up evidence and some trumped up testimony, and you lock a guy up. Think about this, and I never put it together till they said it on Undisclosed today, that one of the points of the cell evidence was to keep the alibi witnesses from coming in. So let's say there were 70 alibi witnesses that saw Adnan at the mosque January 13th. The cell evidence keeps them out. And then they come in and they say something and people say, well, of course, they're all Muslims. Of course they're going to vouch for each other. And it would do more harm than good to have them as witnesses. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never seen that the role of the cell phone evidence was to invalidate the legitimate testimony of reputable witnesses by the dozens. If it's true what Kevin Urich said in the Intercept interview, who knows? But it makes a lot of sense to me. So we have this witness who's totally unreliable, and we have maybe these 80 people that even the most biased jury, other than a jury as biased and terrible as the one in To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, just a regularly biased jury, the ones that happen typically, right? That we as lawyers we deal with, just with the kind of biases we all have. That kind of jury on the 80th witness of the grandma who's at the mosque every Friday and has dedicated her whole life and gone through hell and back to give her children and her grandchildren a better life, they're going to believe her over Jay. So we trump up this cell phone evidence to invalidate all that. So imagine how that feels. So the smallness of the scale. So this truth is this big thing, this boulder that you can kick, but it's going to kick you back. It'll probably roll on you, which is what's happening now. This boulder of truth is rolling down, mowing people left and right, and they're running. I'm mixing metaphors, but they're jumping ship. It's certainly happening. And so the scale's huge. Scale of lies and suffering and misery, small. Scale of truth, big. So think about this. Think about this for a moment. So the courtroom, true, there's a courtroom where these motions are being heard. But before anything got heard in the courtroom, in there, it was heard out there. So the courtroom of the world, this movement all over the place, people waking up, coming to their senses, looking at the truth. The battle was won there, and now it's being won in the trenches. But think about how the battle against Adnan was won. It was won in a tiny courtroom, with one witness, trumped up evidence, and a lot of petty things. Do you guys remember, and this is when I first got really worked up about this, as a man, as a lawyer, as a whatever. And that was when I heard the interview. I don't remember if it was on the Addendum or one of the regular episodes where Adnan's brother Tanvir, I might be mispronouncing it, talked about how the trial went down. We have this packed courtroom, lots of people from Adnan's side of things there. And I'm going to say the name right, McGillivray. I think I said it right. So that detective is there. And do you remember that his family was there and they were taunting Adnan's father, saying, hey, nothing personal, we're just putting your murdering son away. They were trying to get under his skin. They had that plant in the audience, the South Asian plant, and made it look like he was on Adnan's side of the courtroom, causing disruption. Petty, juvenile, prankster things. So that's what the movement of lies looks like. But look at what the truth looks like. It looks like overwhelming evidence. It looks like getting the state's own expert witness to say that it was a big facade, and a lot of humor and fun and encouragement. So it struck me the scale of this case. And let's not, so being very whimsical, but we're here now. We're experiencing this moment, this connection with something bigger in some metaphysical sense, truth, justice, and also bigger as a community. I mean, I don't think I'm overstating things to say that I feel this connection to, I think, all of you, and so many of you personally that I've met online. And I mean, I'm going to read one other quote from Brothers Karamazov that I think, I don't know, maybe I'm reading it just for myself, but I will read it. And so, people talk to you a great deal about your education, and this person's talking to children, but I take it from me. But some good sacred memory preserved from childhood is perhaps the best education. If a man carries many such memories with him into life, he is safe to the end of his days. And if one has only one good memory left in one's heart, even that may sometime be the means of saving us. Perhaps we may even grow wicked later on, may be unable to refrain from a bad action, may laugh at men's tears, not those people who say, as Kolya just did, I want to suffer for all men, and may even jeer spitefully at such people. But however bad we may become, which God forbid, yet when we recall how we buried Alusha, how we loved him in his last days, and how we have been talking like friends all together at this stone, the cruelest and most mocking of us, if we do become so, will not dare to laugh inwardly at having been kind and good at this moment. What's more, perhaps, that one memory may keep him from great evil, and he will reflect and say, yes, I was good and honest then. Let him laugh to himself. That's no matter. A man often laughs at what's good and kind, but only from thoughtlessness. But I assure you, boys, that as he laughs, he will say at once in his heart, no, I do wrong to laugh, for that's not a thing to laugh at. And I just feel like this experience that we're having, and it's not over, obviously, and Anon is still locked up, and this isn't about personal experience. It's about getting him free and figuring out who's responsible for Haymon Lee's murder. But I think this is a moment that we can hold on to, and that even, and I can say for myself, even when I'm not feeling it, I can look back and say, but I felt it then, and I knew it then, and so I know it to be true, and that's something I can hold on to. And maybe I've had experiences like that in my life, and I think many of you have too. And I just say here that this is one of those experiences. This is that time in the movie when people have a realization. That's it. We're here. And so let's think about that. I'm going to talk a bit about just three things that are the best of Anon's reply brief. So let's say something about what it means, okay? When you file a brief and you get an affidavit from the other side's expert witness at trial. Now, in the dark holes on Reddit where people who want to just talk about how Anon is guilty there are people who are trying to parse this affidavit and say it's not that big of a deal. Do not listen to them. Do not listen to them. This affidavit could have 3 words, but if it's signed by the expert for the other side, that's devastating, that's damning, that's gigantic. There are people, and I say this because I mentioned this on Reddit at some point. Before I was here, I was at the Attorney General's office in San Francisco, in the correctional law section. So we actually defended the state from lawsuits brought by inmates. And so there were cases that involved sort of wrongful conviction type things. Kind of. They weren't criminal. But I had a case that went way bad. But if I ever had a case where my expert filed an affidavit for the other side, I don't know if I'd want to show myself for weeks. It's really, really, really horrible. And as I said there, this is the sort of story that government attorneys tell their children. Say, be honest, or you're going to end up like Kevin Urich. That's how bad this is, or good this is, however you want to say it. But you can't have truth prevailing this way, this side of paradise, more than this. This is just gigantic. Intercept. The gift that keeps on giving, Kevin Urich's Intercept interview. Page 11 of the brief. I think every time Anand's attorney finds a way to get in the Intercept interview, which I just love. So here's the quote on page 11. Kevin Urich, the state's lead prosecutor, explicitly made this point in an interview he gave earlier this year with the online publication The Intercept. Quote, Jay's testimony by itself, would that have been proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Urich asked rhetorically. Probably not. Cell phone evidence by itself? Probably not. See, he's being open-minded. But he said, when you put together cell phone records in Jay's testimony, they corroborate and feed off each other. It's a very strong evidentiary case. First of all, you catch that, feed off each other? That's exactly what went on. There was a lot of feeding off of each other of both those sides to come up with a story. But it's just a beautiful thing that this Intercept interview that was going to be his moment to stop the bleeding, to keep things, to say to the public, nothing to see, move along. There's some problems with this case. There's problems in every case. We have collateral facts that change. Witnesses lie. They're all criminals anyway. But just be assured, the important fact, the non-collateral fact, is there. Adnan did it. That was the point of the Intercept interview. So it really pleases me when it comes out in these pleadings. And then the third thing, because a lot's been talked about, but the third thing I really liked about the brief, the takeaway, was I'm forgetting the name of Anand's lawyer. I know his last name's Brown, but he's very good with understatement. And here's his understatement. Again, talking about Exhibit 31, the key thing. Second, as described above, the state has taken the incorrect position that the excerpt in Exhibit 31 is not a subscriber activity report. It took this position, apparently, without consulting an expert, without reviewing the original documents, which it controls, and without upholding its duty to seek the truth. Rather, it appears the state was merely trying to gain an advantage in connection with the instant motion. You think? But the statement was so much more powerful because there was no hyperbole there. If anything, mostly any unbiased reader would read that and say, oh, that's not the half of it. So those were some beautiful moments that I followed in the brief, and I read it. I had a lot of fun. I think it's the best thing that I've seen filed on the Adnan Syed side, and there's more in store if whatever the next moment is. I know that they're holding back some really good nuggets. I do believe that. I'll say one other thing about the affidavit from the expert. Some people have said, wait, I'm going to say this in defense of Reddit. There are places on Reddit that are not bad, that are really good. And I found some of them, but they're kind of super secret. So maybe you'll find your way to them too, but they're there. So he's holding back on some stuff, and it will come out as this goes on. At the very least, when this case is over, there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be released. So where are we now? Another quote from Newman, John Henry Newman. He said, "One step enough." So, one step enough. But the step is the legal side's handling getting Anand out, and I think there is a movement that's effective, that's real, that's doing real work. It's not propaganda, to find out who's responsible for Heyman Lee's death. And it needs to continue. And hopefully this elation, this excitement, this happiness we're feeling is going to play into that. But there's three things I think we should all think about right now. When we're at the moment of saying, well, let's find out what happened. Or three feelings we should have, I'm not sure. One is, let's realize what we don't know. Yes, we'll talk about, there'll be some questions, question and answer again about Dawn. Dawn is definitely coming up. But what do we not know? There's a lot we don't know. And so many of us, I'll speak for myself, what I took such umbrage at, and I take umbrage in many cases, and I've been guilty at myself as a lawyer, is having some facts and believing or wanting to believe that those facts invariably lead to the outcome that I want. And so we have a lot of facts. There's a lot of damning things going on. There's a lot we think we know, but there's a lot we don't know. And so at this point, even though we're all just individual people, we have the power to make life difficult for people. That's something that exists in human beings, and especially in social media. And it's really on us right now to make sure that that doesn't happen unnecessarily. So let's think about what we don't know. And in connection with that, I don't have the clip right here, but do you remember when Deidre Enright with the Innocence Project, when she was talking to Sarah, she told Sarah how she goes about doing her investigations and how she goes about determining whether the person she's considering representing is actually innocent, and also hopefully being able to find out who the real perpetrator is. And she talked about that experience of going over things in her mind and weighing things and being in that place of uncertainty and just staying there and not trying to short circuit it to get to the place of certainty. Just being in that place as long as it takes. And I think a lot of us we just need to stay in that place of uncertainty until it all comes in. And be very careful about what we say. I'm going to try to be careful about what I've said. I'm sure I've been guilty of not being careful. Because even if I know some of the truth, even if I know who the person is, I don't know all the circumstances about what really went down. And we don't know because of the prosecution's laziness. That's true. But we do know some things, but we don't know all of it. And this is kind of an old-fashioned idea, but I think it's helpful to distinguishing between the act itself, the consent, of the will of the person involved, and the knowledge of the person involved. So we know someone's calling in from Arabia. Wow. Okay. Oh. In any event, I know Rabia's on here. Hi, Rabia. You missed some of it, but it's going to be available on, what's the thing that I have it on? Anyway, there'll be links. Oh, someone said, okay, I'm getting distracted. So, where was I? Where I was saying is that we know some things. So even if we can figure out who was involved, and we know what happened, we don't necessarily know what the consent of their will was, and also their knowledge. So we don't know what their state of mind was, and there's a lot that can go into that. So I'm just saying that until we know some of those things, let's not assume that, because anyone who's involved in this, whoever it is who did this to Hay, has a family. It's they have people in their lives that love them, and that are going to be deeply grieved if they find out about it, or deeply grieved if they already know about it. And I'm not saying, there's a quote I think I used from Psalms that came earlier that says, the wicked man flees when no one chases him. And I think that's true, that probably the person or persons who were involved in Haman Lee's death, murder, however you want to put it, have been carrying this for a long time. And it doesn't justify what they did or anything, but let's honor the suffering that they've had to carry, rightly so, from their involvement. And let's not unnecessarily add to it. Even though, whoever was involved with it, there's no defense for what they did, but there's a lot more that we might not know about. And we should be sad, too. We should be sad. I think it's that at that point. Right, and whoever's saying that, I'm not saying no one should be prosecuted. I'm just saying that we need to recognize, what's going on, and I believe that there's judgment in this world, and there's another kind of judgment, and I'm not qualified to give the other kind of judgment. But we should be sad at this point too, and we should think about, how much has been lost. So I'm at the end of what I was going to say, and I think this is the part for question and answer. I do have two questions and questions that I wanted to address first that people address to me, and then I'll try to answer yours. The first is, and I'm just going to paraphrase it because the person, right, and I'll say this too because Robbie was saying it's hard to be sad when I'm so full of rage. That's true, and so I shouldn't even say should, because at this period, especially for Adnan's family, Robbie and other people, their situation is different, and I'm not in a place to say anyone how they should be. But I think for the rest of us who have, the ability, to kind of make that decision on how we're going to address it, sadness, I think plays a role in it. It's a place to be and sit, at least for a time. So I will answer the question, and so the one point that people made, and I wanted to address it, and maybe it's a little off topic, maybe it isn't. It was saying about maybe in my last Periscope about Dawn that they thought the tone was a little jokey and frivolous, and I talked about Mockingjay and that in seeing Dawn as PETA, and I hope. Well, I guess I gave that impression. That's not what I mean to. So I'll just make a quick kind of, defense. Is that I find it incredibly useful to try to understand what type of person we're dealing with. And the difficulty with Don is we never did, because we never had any tape. I never had seen any pictures of him. And so I had the biggest problem kind of identifying who it is. And for me, movies, especially popular ones, speak to something in people. Something in us, something that fits, that jibes with our lives. And a lot of times the plot of a movie or a book can be a shortcut to understanding things in the real world. So that's all I was trying to do. So if you took offense, I'm sorry. I don't at all mean to minimize any of this. It tears me up. I'm very sad about it all. And I'm going to read a question from, and she said it was okay to talk. Her Twitter handle is Sato, and I'm going to try to get, let me get the pronunciation right. Sato Mughalian. So Sato Mughalian, it's spelled Sato Moughalian, an Armenian name. And one of my really close friends in college was Armenian, so I learned all the names, and fascinating. Okay, so here's her question. Talking about Dawn, a couple of things. I'll just cut some. Okay, I'm going to take the real takeaway. Last week, my wonder about Jay was whether, in fact, he knew what he was doing all along by constantly changing his story. He seemed sharper to me than he has been described by some. Given his intense distrust of the police, I wouldn't even call them if I was being shot at, Serial 5, might he have been practicing a form of self-impeachment? In other words, did he keep changing an untruthful story as a form of invalidation while appearing to comply with the demands of law enforcement? Have a great weekend, and thank you for what you were doing, Sato. That's a great point, Sato, and the thought came to me. It's called invalidation, and it comes up a lot of times that I've seen in history. I think it even comes up when someone's guilty. When someone is guilty, they know they're guilty, and they're trying to kind of poke in the eye of the prosecutor. And I think about that, to give you an example. There's some stuff, well, I won't get into too much, there's some stuff that Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the chief architects of the Final Solution, said when he was tried in Jerusalem, when he was found in Argentina and brought to justice in Jerusalem in the 60s, that he said that I think was definitely this. I think there were some things he made up about rivers of blood coming from the ground that he probably just said to try to poke his finger in the prosecution. So that's an example of someone obviously guilty who still uses this form of invalidation. I thought the same thing about Jay. I'm not sure. I think he did that at certain times. I tend to think that in his Intercept interview, for instance, when he said, if Adnan didn't do it, that has nothing to do with me. And when he said, well, if Adnan didn't do it, who did? I think maybe invalidation is the wrong word, but there might have been some clues there in that he was directing people. I'm not sure, but that's an excellent point, Sato, and that's something to think about. And that's something we can think about. Okay, anyone else want to make a comment, have a question? I know there was some stuff coming, and I missed it. I know someone said that they could have been Adnan as a South Asian male at the time, and that's really poignant thought. Well, I think I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming and being here for these. Oh, here we go. Any thoughts on why Don said positive things to say about Adnan while versus pointing the finger? And what sort of law do you practice now? Well, I'll say first, and I should have said at the beginning, I'm at Twitter at Kenny, at KENNY-BRENDAN, at KENNY-BRENDAN. And that's probably the easiest, best way to reach me overall. That's why I say it. In terms of what law I practice, civil litigation, defense side, mostly for Fortune 500 companies and mass torts, class action, product liability. And I do a lot of stuff with e-discovery and technology and things like that as well, and think a lot about trial lawyer stuff. So about Don, well, as you might have noted, that when I was talking about the rush to judgment, one of the people I was thinking about was Don, because there's a lot that's coming up. Realize non-citizens. And I'm just writing down a few of these questions. So with Don, what was he doing? There's a lot of possibilities. I will answer this because it's from Robbie. If you do e-discovery, if you retrieved emails from 1999 or earlier, okay, I can answer that. What might be at issue, Robbie? 1999. Let me think for a minute. We're talking about, and just make sure I got it right, we're talking about Adnan's email from 1999, Yahoo email. Am I right? Okay, I think so. I'm going to assume that that's what you're saying, or maybe you just have a more general question. Maybe there's other emails we want to get. Yes. No, there's also the emails of the investigators and detectives, but that might be interesting too if we could get those. Though I don't know if they're even using those then. Anyway, it depends. The problem we're dealing with is this is Yahoo, and I don't know for sure how Yahoo maintains their old stuff. If this was, let me tell you what I would do if this was a normal case. There's rarely a normal case when you're dealing with emails from the 1990s. Yeah, and you can get emails. Robbie is talking about emails from Hotmail. Yeah, there obviously were emails back then, and we were using email for e-discovery, though it was usually in a pretty primitive way. They were being turned into PDFs. The problem with Hotmail, Yahoo, any of those external clients, and when I say clients, I mean email clients, is that all that stuff would be internal, meaning you would need to get to Yahoo or Hotmail if they had it, and trying to get them to do anything is almost impossible. The one possibility would be if there were some sort of backup tapes or an old computer lying around, like the computer maybe that was at the library that Adnan was using. And yeah, someone said that the physical drives have since been scrapped and Hotmail doesn't back up deleted accounts. Yeah, that's probably true. I'm just thinking out loud, if the email somehow could be on someone else's computer, because sometimes email can be saved in various ways that could lead it to at least make an impression on a computer. So if we knew of any other computer used, I know it's so long ago, I'm trying to think any other possibilities. I'm having trouble thinking of, I don't know, because, yeah, cookies on a computer from 1999. Yeah, if we could just, but what are the chances that that computer would be anywhere? I bet it's not. And I'm guessing we don't know anyone who says that they Yeah, the library proceeds long gone, and we don't know anyone who says that they were sending emails back and forth to Anon. We don't know who he would have been emailing or whether they kept stuff. Oh yeah, someone said it would all be on tapes with Yahoo. Right. Right. Yeah, generally it would be on tapes with Yahoo. I'm just saying there's some possibility maybe that, somehow a cookie or something like that could be saved. I'm being vague, but I don't know. If someone wants to direct message me, Robbie, or something, I have some people. I know a lot of e-discovery people, and I'd love to put you in touch with them. And if they can think of something, they can. So just send me, or I'll send you an email or something, and maybe we'll get that ball rolling, because I know a lot of people, and I think plenty of them would love to help. Some of them probably follow this case. I know one person in particular in Minneapolis. So, all right. So hopefully that's kind of the best we can do there. So Dawn. So what's going on with Dawn saying nice things about Adnan? Well, there's a few possibilities. One is that Dawn is innocent, had nothing to do with Hayes' death, liked Adnan, which most people did, and he's just not going to lie for some prosecutor. So it could be that simple. People take, we forget now, maybe after this case, but some people really take their oath seriously. I mean, I try to. My wife and I have gotten some arguments about that, about the information I've given insurance companies and that affecting my rates, being too honest or whatever. But, if it says under penalty of perjury, I kind of have to answer to my integrity and maybe a higher power. So and someone asked about falsifying records. So he could be doing that. He could be just telling the truth. He could be saying that to make himself look better if he had some involvement. Like, look, Don's a nice guy that wouldn't throw someone under the bus. And even when you'd think he'd hate Adnan, he says nice things about him. It could be that. And it also could, the other thing that it could be is, there's a third possibility, but I'm not thinking of it. Those are probably the two. And the falsifying records, well, this goes in with my emo theory, and just a possibility that, if he's a socially awkward guy, always has been his whole life, doesn't really have friends, doesn't get along with people well, rubs people the wrong way, breaks under pressure, etc., it's conceivable that they could have falsified the records even though he had no involvement. I mean, maybe there were some things that happened that put him near the scene where Hay was murdered, even though he didn't have anything to do with it, and he didn't have a good explanation. And Robbie is noting that if Don's guilty and said negative things about Anon, it would make Anon suspicious. Yeah, I think that's true too. That's a good point, because Don's been under the radar. He's right, and that's what Robbie is saying, because Anon was there for that. I think it's hilarious that the autocorrect keeps saying Arabia for Rabia, because that was the whole thing at the trial, about Anon being an Arab. Though he's from Pakistan. So yeah, and that's the other possibility. That if Don was involved, if someone else is calling from Chanhassen. Yeah, I go to my parishes in Chanhassen, St. Hubert's. Love Chanhassen, just up the hill. It's one of the few hills in Minnesota. I love it. Reminds me of California. Okay, so yeah, and if Don could be, let's just say for a moment, just to say that he was responsible in some way or another for Hayes' death, and he doesn't want to go to prison or is willing to face the consequences, but it doesn't mean that he wants to add to his already incredible guilt and wrongdoing by sending Anon there. So it's not, things aren't so diametrically opposed maybe as we sometimes think, like there's these, it's one or the other. So it could be Right, right. Yeah, and also, right, someone said that he could be guilty, had no reason to bash Anon, and he could be making the whole thing up about Urich bullying him, which would make sense to me, that given his personality, from what we can gather, he could be the type of person that could be pretty adept at playing a victim, just based on the fact that, he feels like a victim. So it could be a comfortable place for him to say, Urich, did all this stuff to me, and he got a lot of sympathy from people based on it. People thought, oh, he's a good guy. He's also against Urich. So if that's true, well, someone said it's an odd thing to lie about. I would just say that if we just assume for a moment that he was somehow involved, that Don was somehow involved in Hae-Min Lee's death, that part at the end of Serial was pretty well played. It was pretty well played by him, and so it was pretty successful at that point, if that's true. And someone says that Urich's a bully and everything like that. Yeah. Someone asked what Don looks like. Well, I can just tell you that he does not look like a surfer, which is what I thought he looked like. I had, listening to Serial and everything like that, until I heard Bob Ruff's treatment of Don, I thought he was dreamy, and he's not dreamy looking. Someone said that Don blends in with the crowd. Yeah, I think that's all true. So that's what I'm saying. The place where we have to sit is that we have what we can see as personality traits, and personality traits might not be very attractive. We might not like them, but they don't necessarily lead to the conclusion we might think they do. And so I just think all of us need to do whatever we can, right? In our role, we all have some role in this. Some bigger than others, obviously on Undisclosed and Bob Ruff, they have a much more direct role in the investigation, but the rest of us, need to think about that. And someone said, what was the point? What was the point when you were listening to Undisclosed, when you knew that Anon was innocent? I don't know if it happened when I was listening to Undisclosed. I think it was when I was reading Susan Simpson's blog. And when I was reading that blog, when she talked about Don's alibi, it was looking at the difference between how they investigated Don and how they investigated Adnan that showed me the rush to judgment. Yes, Susan is brilliant. And so I was reading her blog posts, and as a result, I said, well, wait a minute, and again, I took Susan for what she was saying. We're not saying that Don did it, but the way they investigated Don versus the way they investigated Anon was totally different. And so at that point I said, we need to rethink. I need to rethink everything, and I need to ask myself how far down the rabbit hole goes. What do we really know? And every time, listening to Undisclosed, doing some of my own research, not much of that really, listening to Serial Dynasty, now Truth and Justice podcast, I found that the things I thought were secure weren't. And so, again, I think those are most of the questions, but as we go forward with finding who really did it, let's try to not be like the other side. Let's try to keep that same rigorous focus, objectivity with which each point, and I'm going to try to say that I'm going to make sure that I'm sure of something before I'm sure of it. So maybe we can do that. I think that's, unless there's anything else, going once, going twice, we'll get out of there. And, people are saying about what could have happened. There's a lot that could have happened. There's a lot that could have happened with Don and with other people, and we'll have to see. But thank you, Undisclosed. Thank you, everyone else. Thank you, Rabia, for being in the trenches when no one else was. When no one was paying attention, no one was listening. We wouldn't be here if you hadn't stuck with it So anyway, good night.